Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm Captain X. We're going to be going through the top loadouts for the Season 6 update for Warzone. Really quickly, buffs and nerfs for this season. Nothing too crazy here. ABR full auto got a bit of a range buff. The AK did get a buff to its recoil, so we'll make it a little bit more viable, especially on Resurgence. AMAX got a pretty nice buff to its range here, really extended the range, and a small buff to bullet velocity. Model L got some nice range and damage buffs and bullet velocity. Will finally make it kind of another viable option after it hasn't been very good for too long. Kompakt, some movement speed handling buffs. PPSH, a bit of a range buff and also some handling buffs. And the SOG, some range buffs. A few other kind of minor changes to shotguns here, LMGs. Tier 2 conversion did get a range and handling buff, SVD, but most of those aren't going to make much of a difference. If you guys are serious about improving your gameplay outside of just loadouts, probably the best thing you could do is upgrading your controller and using a custom one like the one I do. So this has 4 reprogrammable paddles that you can bind any button to. It's got the digital tap mouse click triggers. I have a tall right analog stick, which gives me more surface area to aim. And these have the built-in TMR sticks, which are like Hall effects where you can reset them and they'll never get stick drift. But the TMRs feel way more accurate and way more precise compared to the regular Hall effect sticks. And best of all, this comes with a lifetime warranty. So this is an AIM controller. It's what I've been using for several years. If you want to use one, check it out at aimcontrollers.com and make sure you use code TCaptainX. Big sale going on, the one price, no limit sale. All right, so let's start with breaking down the long range meta, or really the ARs here. We do have the new Merrick 556 AR, very similar to kind of like the Automaton if you played Vanguard at the end of Warzone 1. It is a great gun. I really think the top 3 guns are going to be the Merrick, the Kilo, and the AMAX, and you really can't go wrong with any of these 3. They all have kind of slight trade-offs. The Merrick is going to be a faster fire rate, lower recoil, but very similar TTKs. Kilo is still the Kilo. It did not get nerfed. It was the best AR last season. It will still be, you know, basically right up there as the best AR. But I do think the AMAX also kind of sneaks into the discussion as a Resurgence top AR, probably not on big map. It does definitely have more recoil than both of these guns, but overall it has better TTKs, especially has some insanely good long range TTKs that I will put the chart up of just these 3 of the TTK chart so that you can compare just those 3. Now after that, you know, the AIMs, GPR, those are really like solid options, but they're just a little bit overshadowed. FFAR does have insanely good TTKs, better than the AMAX really at most ranges, but I do think the AMAX is just easier to use as far as its recoil. Model L finally becomes a decent option. You can get some really nasty TTKs if you hit all chest shots, but it's hard to get those TTKs. As soon as you start hitting like a stomach or leg, that TTK is going to drop. AK is very similar to the AMAX TTK wise, but I think it still has a little bit more recoil. So it's definitely a fun option to use on Resurgence. The ABR is still insanely good at long range. It has super low recoil, great long range TTKs. It is that kind of like that auto burst. So definitely no sleep on this, especially on Verdansk. The Cypher is okay. I didn't put the ground here. The ground would kind of be here at the bottom. It's just meh. It's just fine, but there's nothing special about it after it was nerfed. Moving on to SMGs, we have the new Dresden 9mm, which is basically the MP40. It is going to be a top-notch SMG. I do think actually we have a pretty wide variety of SMGs to choose from this season. I think, you know, the Jackal is still going to probably be the top pick amongst like competitive prototype players, because it can achieve a very fast TTK as long as we hit mostly chest shots. But it is very possible if you start hitting too many stomach and leg shots to get a much worse TTK. So it's kind of a high risk, high reward type gun. The Dresden is going to be very consistent, basically identical TTKs of the Ladra, but I think it has probably maybe a little bit less recoil, maybe about the same recoil as the Ladra. It is a slower fire rate. It's got nice iron sights. It's got good range. So it feels really good all around. The C9 is still going to be that tried and true, just great iron, super low recoil, slightly slower TTKs, and the range does fall off a bit harder on the C9 compared to others. But as long as you're within that first damage range of 14 meters, which most of your fights are, it's going to feel basically the same as the Dresden and the Ladra Jill. And then finally, we have the Kompakt. The Kompakt did get a small kind of handling type buff. It's had much less recoil since last season. It can get some crazy good TTKs. You can get a 495 TTK if you hit all chest shots. You're gonna much more often get this 550 TTK, which is only slightly ahead of like the Dresden and the Ladra. but it actually has a great damage range drop off. The damage only barely falls off. And the recoil is really not too bad on it after they've buffed it. So it's a great one. Now, I definitely don't want people to sleep on the PPSH. I think the PPSH, I almost put the PPSH in kind of like my top green S tier, especially because they keep buffing it. It's nice. You got to give it a try. And then just for a quick overall tier list, this is just kind of how I break down my SMG. So you'll have my S tier SMGs. Again, I think Jackal and Dresden are probably gonna be the top two, but nothing, all of these are gonna be top tier picks. For Resurgence, those top three that I showed, the Merrick, the Kilo, and the AMAX. For big map, it's probably going to be mostly Merrick and Kilo, but the ABR is 100% a great option on big map specifically. FFAR is great on Resurgence as well if you can handle the recoil. AK might be an option. As far as sniper support, it's a little bit more specific over here. AS Val is probably my #1 favorite, but the GPR and FFAR are great as well. Also, the ABR full auto is a pretty solid option too. Sniper is a lot of options. I love the AMR mod, super underrated. HDR is still solid. Frostline's pretty good. 7.62, and then the car, for Resurgence only. LMGs aren't that great. The XMG is not bad. It's just like the reload and the handling is so slow. And then the Marine SP shotgun, it can one shot. It's very tricky to use, but it can be a lot of fun if you're a high school player. All right, for our loadout, starting with the AS Val, my favorite sniper support here, paired with the AMR mod. Again, a lot of options as far as snipers go, but this has great one range shot and it has that super fast fire rate, so can be a really good option. AS Val class here, this is a 5 attachment build. Usually not really gonna run Gunfighter too much on this. We're going Ranger Mag 2, ergonomic, infiltrator stock for that faster strafe speed, and then recoil springs. If you want this to be maybe a little bit less mobile and a little bit more steady to use, you absolutely could swap probably the infiltrator stock for an optic. You also could swap the Ranger for the vertical foregrip for a little bit better recoil control. You don't really need to use a barrel on this because it has such good range already as is. And then the AMR mod, again, this is a sleeper sniper. I promise you this thing is actually a lot of fun to use. Mono gain twist, we're going to max the bullet velocity on this, ends up giving it a crazy good bullet velocity, lightweight pad, quick draw grip, and then over pressure. The buffed AK-74, the recoil is really not bad on it. It's more visual recoil than it is actual recoil. It just has kind of like a shake and a bounce to it. And then the Ladra, this is again an S tier SMG. It's one of my personal favorites actually. Really like the fast fire rate, and it's just got a great TTK all around. AK build here, we're going with a 1x optic, mono, gain twist, vertical, and mag 2. I will say for Resurgence, you definitely could try going an iron sight build and then putting on something like recoil springs, and this will feel really good. And you also could consider swapping the monolithic with a compensator for even better recoil control. And then the Ladra, as far as my barrels on SMGs, I tend to go long barrel, but long barrel or reinforced, it's really up to you. It doesn't really matter too much at the end of the day. Ranger foregrip is what I usually use, but if you want more recoil, then I would go vertical instead. Ranger's just to help with that mobility a little bit. Mag 2, ergonomic, and infiltrator stock. However, I will say infiltrator or balance stock is kind of a personal preference between these SMGs. Infiltrator gives you more of that strafing, aim walking movement speed, whereas balance is gonna help that overall movement speed more. This is the Model L. This is the STG blueprint specifically, which gives it some nicer irons. This is definitely one I think you should give a try on Resurgence. It can have some really nice TTKs. And then the good old C9, we can't go wrong with it. Just great irons, great all around everything. So this is the Model L with the Warrior's Blood blueprint, which is from Prestiging, which does give it a little bit nicer iron. So I'm going mono, a long barrel, vertical mag 2, and over pressured. Now, if you wanted to just run it with a regular optic, I would probably go back to reinforced or gain twist, swap off over pressured, and put an optic back on it. And then the C9, again, basically an identical build to how that Ladra was set up. Long barrel, Ranger, Mag 2, ergonomic, and infiltrator. But again, you can go reinforced or you can go vertical. You also could swap off like an infiltrator stock or even swap the barrel for a compensator or suppressor if you want recoil control or to stay off the minimap. All right, getting into some of our top loadouts. This is the AMAX. This is an iron sight build, but I really like these irons, and the recoil really is not bad on the AMAX anymore. And then the Kompakt. Kompakt is just so underrated. Such good TTKs. The recoil is really not bad after they buffed it about a season ago. So I've played around with a lot of AMAX builds. This is my favorite. With the compensator and over pressured and gain twist, you end up getting a really good bullet velocity of about 1600, but it also has very low recoil with the compensator. Of course, you are going to ping on the mini map. and then vertical and mag 2. Now, I will say you also could run this exact setup and then you could swap and put an optic back on it. You know, I usually like the Volchivsky or the Dobrik, either or, whichever you prefer. If you have really good recoil control, you absolutely could then, you know, put the monolithic back on. With a build like this, you probably could stay here. This gives you still a very similar bullet velocity, but you're definitely going to have a bit more recoil with this setup. And then the Kompakt. So the Kompakt is one that we really want to try to go both vertical and recoil springs and really make that recoil quite solid. This is when I use that integrated suppress barrel because it gives us a suppressor and it gives us better iron sights and a damage range boost. So it's a really, really nice barrel to use. Mag 3 on this one and then ergonomic. All right, then the good old Kilo. This is again an iron sight build, but we absolutely can run this with an optic. Great recoil, solid irons too. And then the Jackal. This is the VMP blueprint, which is from like Prestige 7 or 8, which gives you a little bit nicer irons. So Kilo build here, mono, reinforced, vertical, mag 2, and then overpressured. Absolutely could just take off overpressured and then put an optic on and you're good to go as far as that. You just will have a little bit less of the bullet velocity. But if you do that, you absolutely could put on gain twist instead and really catch that bullet velocity back up, make it feel, you know, very hit scan, even without overpressured. For the Jackal build, the setup's a little bit unique. So the Jackal last season got a big buff specifically to its recoil springs. And the way it works, the recoil springs actually ends up being kind of more valuable and useful compared to the vertical foregrip. So we're going to go long barrel, mag 2 ergonomic infiltrator stock, and then recoil springs. Now I will say if you want this to be ultra low recoil, you could swap like the infill stock for the vertical foregrip. But at that point, I think you're better just to use another SMG like, you know, the MP40 or the C9 or something like that instead. All right, then we got the new Merrick 5.56. Again, this reminds me a lot of the Automaton. Fast fire rate, but it also has great handling for an AR, which is really, really nice, especially on Resurgence. And then the MP40, we got some good classic MP40 iron sights. Just feels good overall. It's, you know, recoil is not bad. Feels like it hits hard because it's a little bit slower fire rate. So for the Merrick, the base range is crazy good. So I'm definitely gonna go gain twist on this one. And then just whatever optic, mono, vertical, and mag 2. You definitely could go 2x or 3x on this one. I think the recoil is definitely low enough to do that. And then the MP40 here. So the MP40 is a little bit different. It does not have a underbarrel. There's no underbarrel attachment on this. And so with that, the light stock and the no stock actually give it sprinting movement speed. So with the light stock, we can get our sprinting movement speed up all the way to 7, which is pretty fast for a lot of these SMGs. If the movement speed feels really, really nice overall. I am just going mag 1 on this one because it's 48 and it's a slower shooting gun. Mag 2, I think you don't really need in all honesty, but you definitely could put it on if you want to. Then we're going ergonomic, long barrel, and suppressor. You absolutely could, though, run instead of suppressor, you could put on a fire mod like recoil spring, you could go compensator, whichever one you feel like. But to me, I kind of like the idea of using a suppressor and staying off the minimap. Now, if I get a chance to go Gunfighter, and if I was going to run the Merrick, this is how I would run it. I actually don't have the target laser unlocked yet, but the target laser does make it feel really good. It's just, it is very visible to opponents. It's the only downside of it. But basically the same build as before. We're just adding the recoil springs and then the quick draw stock. This is another one that the stocks are kind of different on this one because this one does not have a rear grip. And so with that, kind of changes things a little bit. A lot of different options though on what you could do here stock wise. I almost never run a Gunfighter SMG. I will instead have a battle ready class. That's just like a good regain or end game to pick it up because you get your utility box. So I'll normally just put it on like an SMG class. And so for this, you know, this is just a Jackal class. You could do it with the MP40, whatever you really prefer there. Now, as far as tacticals and lethals go, so smoke grenades got a really hard nerf this season. You can only carry one smoke grenade at a time, which is, I don't know how I feel about that. I think on big map, smoke still would be valuable to use, but on a Resurgence, they become less valuable that you can only hold one. Stims are kind of doo-doo, except for, you know, like maybe gas plays. I've been on the flashbang train for quite a while. They're super underrated. Man, if you use these right in fights, like it's just like a free kill if you get someone flashed properly. When I'm just playing Resurgence pubs, I'm going throwing knives. But if I'm playing ranked or big map, I am actually leaning towards spring mines a lot, just kind of in the way that I play. But if you're more of an aggressive player, you know, Molotovs, Thermobarics got a nice buff, so they might be worth giving a try. Thermites are great. A lot of the top pros and stuff run thermites because they can deal with vehicles, and you can throw them and they kind of, you know, they burn for a few seconds. You can kind of like hold people on a corner. So a lot of options as far as lethals go. And then finally perks. So when it comes to resurgence, I think Mountaineer is the #1 perk one. Because you can drop from basically every building and not die, with the exception of like top of water tower or lighthouse. And so it just allows a lot of escapability. But on big map, it's not as valuable because a lot of the buildings tend to be a little bit taller, and so you can't jump off of them. So on big map, I'll lean towards something like Scavenger, especially if you're going to run smokes. This would allow you to refill your smokes really well. Survivor can be a great option too. The only thing with Survivor is you don't want to run Survivor and Quick Fix because they do almost the same thing. So run one or the other, but normally I like to go Quick Fix in perk 2. Just gets, you know, starts that health regen a lot faster. Tracker is phenomenal though in pubs. Even though after its nerf, it's still a great perk, but you cannot run Tracker in ranked. So in pubs, you definitely could consider going Tracker in Survivor as 1 and 2 would be a great option. And then perk 3, I am almost always going Tempered. It just saves you on plates, makes plating faster. But you definitely can't forget about Ghost, especially on big map. It can be very, very powerful to stay off UAVs. Alertness, it's just not quite good enough, not quite strong enough. And you can often loot like Resolute and Gung Ho in pubs. All right, guys, that's going to wrap things up. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe, check out a stream here on YouTube. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you in the next one.